So I'm Allie, and I co-own a yoga studio in Santa Monica, and I've been teaching yoga for 16 years, but I didn't come to talk about yoga, although I will talk about that a little bit later. But I came to talk about hope, because that's the topic tonight, and it's really broad. I feel hopeful because I believe that thoughts create reality. And there's a lot of energy in the room. It's like, wow. But that's cool. I'll work with that. That's good. Just bring it on. So that, again, I'll kind of tie that back in a little while. I think the place to start talking about hope is really the playground. So I have a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and I spend a lot of time at the playground. And I notice almost every day, and I certainly experienced in my own life, parents that are completely loving, saying things like, don't be sad, don't be angry, don't be scared. A few months ago, my son fell off a slide and scraped his elbow, and he was bleeding and crying. And I was talking to him about bad surprises and making sure, he was okay. And this dad came over, totally well-intentioned, and like smacked him on the back and said, "You're okay, tough guy." And I just wanted to say, like, don't put that on my kid, because maybe he's not okay, and he doesn't need to be okay, and it's okay for him to cry. And I wanted to say a lot of things, but I didn't. I often want to pass out yoga schedules, and I don't. People like honking in traffic, and I want to like roll my window down and hand them, but you can't do that. Successfully, you can't do that. So anyway, my whole sort of premise is that we're taught at a very early age to push our feelings down, that what we feel is not okay. There's something wrong with it. If you're sad, you should cover that up. You should save that for private time. And I think that underlying that is this idea of survival of the fittest, that we're competing against each other, that if you express vulnerability in public, somebody's going to go for your jugular. And I feel pretty vulnerable right now, but nobody's attacking me, right? So it's not true, but it's a story that's part of our culture that I don't even think it's conscious anymore, because it's just been a story for so long, that we pass on to our kids. And it's problematic because that message doesn't end. So, that goes off the playground, and then all of us are hit with daily messages that we're not okay, that we don't feel right, and we need this drug or that drug, or we don't look right, we need a diet, that 10 pounds that you just can't take off, this diet will do it for you, and if this one doesn't work, there's another one. There's like, I don't know, 20 million different diets to lose those 10 pounds, and then you'll be happy, right? Or buy this makeup, or you don't smell right, you need this deodorant. Dude, you're losing your hair, we've got a drug for you, and miss, you're growing hair in the wrong places, so you need to go over here. I mean, it's kind of insane, but the message is clear. You're not right, you're not okay, and you need help. And that help comes in the form of buying things. So that's the message that we get, really from an early age. Consumption is the key to happiness, that happiness is out there. So if you can just look right, if you can just buy enough stuff to get yourself looking right, then you'll probably meet the person of your dreams, your soulmate, and you'll live happily ever after in a huge car with, a giant house. And it's all set up. It's basically a lie. Because it doesn't matter how much stuff you buy or how much stuff you have. If you're not happy in here, that'll never satisfy you. It doesn't matter if you lose those 10 pounds, you're going to want to lose 10 more. And then you're going to want to lose 10 more. And maybe you should just never eat, I mean, really, just don't eat. Just stop eating. Because you can't be thin enough, right? And if you're a guy, well, then you're not ripped enough. I mean, it's a sick bunch of stories, but we are inundated with them constantly. So there are all the issues of just starting to really push your feelings down. And I think that most of us, at least I won't speak for anybody in here, but for myself, I know I reached young adulthood, and I really did not have a clue about what made me happy, what fed my soul, what was true for me, even like what I wanted to do on the weekend that would be fun. I really didn't know. I had a lot of ideas that were coming at me all the time, but I really didn't know in my heart. And there's a lot of pressure. It's kind of crazy that we set it up this way. We disconnect ourselves from what we feel, and then we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to know what we want. What do you want to be when you grow up? At 5, what do you want to be? I mean, I don't know. So I think that for me, what started to happen is, I think I got to be about 20, I was in college, and I was pretty serious, pretty dark, frequently depressed, and very focused on myself. And I think that's the flip side of that coin of you don't look right, you don't feel right, you don't smell right. It's very me-centered. It's you, right? It's all about you and what you need to do to make your world better. And so the focus becomes, why am I not happy? And what do I need to do to get happy? And what do I need to do to get my life working right? And the blinders are on. The blinders are on, and it's just a very small view of the world. So for me, luckily, thankfully, I found my way into a yoga class. And I'm not saying yoga is the only way, because I just want to make that really clear. I know we're in Southern California, a lot of you probably do yoga, that's great. But I think it's one love, many paths, however you get there is beautiful. For me, it was yoga. So I started practicing, and I just, little by little, began to uncover what was true for me, what made me happy, who I was. I started to find some peace, and it felt like coming home. And I think that that is a big part of what happens, is that we forget. We're so constantly bombarded with these messages that we're wrong and that we need help in pretty much every area, and that we're separate from each other, right? We're against each other, we're competing with each other. Again, don't show anybody what you really feel, because you're gonna go down, they're gonna get you. So you end up in this tiny little box, and we live in boxes and we drive around in boxes, and everybody's connecting on Facebook. That's not, that's not natural. But we're taught that that's natural. And I think, it's kind of a scary thing that probably everybody in here could tweet, but I don't know how many people would be okay if their food source was cut off for more than a month. We've lost touch with nature. It's another story that I think that we're taught at a very early age, that nature is wild, it needs to be tamed, we're superior, right? I don't know if you guys remember hearing that when you were in school, but we have reason, so we're elevated from the animals, we're higher, and that sort of the underlying message there is that we can dominate. This stuff is all for us, it's for our taking. And this mass consumption that we sort of buy into in our own personal lives, exactly what Steve was talking about, it applies to the planet. We just have consumed and consumed and consumed, and we're in a pretty bad state. I promise I'm getting to the hopeful part now. But before I get there, I just feel like we should, acknowledge where we're at, and this idea that we're all one. In a primitive culture, that's not a concept that a few people have. That's a way of life. We are one doesn't just include the people in the tribe, it includes every living creature, it includes certainly Mother Earth, so, or the planet, if that sounds too new agey for you, that's totally fine. However you want to look at it, it's totally cool. It's a way of life, but we're taught that primitive cultures are somehow, we're superior to them too. And at the heart of a primitive culture, if you study this stuff, it's cooperation. It's the tribe. The tribe takes care of each other. So if one person has food, everybody has food. If one person has a sick kid, everybody has a sick kid. And we've lost that, completely lost that. Now we try to buy security. We try to buy health insurance for the people that can afford it, and that is really, I think, the key issue. Underneath all the other stuff that I'm talking about is how to get back to how to remember who we are. So I'm going to give you my big overview of why I feel hopeful, and then I'll get back to sort of more specific stuff. But I believe that we are made of energy, and that energy doesn't die, it just changes form. I happen to believe the energy that we are made of is love, is light. I have 2 kids, like I said. I know it's not a scientific study, but I have experienced it twice now, that we come into the world and we're totally open and curious and loving and trusting, and we learn fear and we learn defensiveness, and my son doesn't have guns, like toy guns, there's no water guns or no swords in the house, and I remember people saying to me, well, you can do that if you want, but he'll just make one out of his hand because it's biological. It's not, okay? I just want to tell you, again, I know it's one kid, it's not biological. He doesn't watch violent video, he doesn't play video games, doesn't watch anything on TV. That he does watch Sesame Street and a few other educational programs, but what you teach your kids at home is what they're going to take out into the world. And so the reason I feel hopeful is because, again, thoughts create reality. These stories that we pass on to our kids are really what creates the next generation. So we have the power to change the story that we're telling. The only thing is we all have to actually acknowledge the stories that we've been telling are not accurate. And I feel like there's a tipping point happening. I feel like more and more people are saying the same things now. Going back to just like that personal part of this talk, looking at the clock, running out of time. For me, with yoga, I started to, I think, really heal and really come back to myself and start to recognize what made me happy, what I wanted, who I was. And when I started teaching yoga, which happened a few years after I began practicing, I began teaching because I found a lot of peace myself, and I felt like, well, if that's happening for me, that could certainly happen for other people. I want to share the tool that worked for me. I think it's imperative to do that work first, to come back to that love within yourself first. If you want to spread it, you have to be brimming over with it. Naturally, we are. We are, all of us, everybody in the room, everybody everywhere, I think, is brimming over with it naturally, but it gets covered over by other stuff that you can uncover. I think what I experienced and where the real sort of transformation began for me is that the more time and energy I spent focusing on helping other people, teaching yoga, and I was doing it all day, every day, the happier I got, the more fulfilled I felt. The less I thought about that small I, me, mine, that world with the blinders on, the better I felt, the more gratifying my experience was day to day, and the more that I felt I had purpose, and I just really got happier and happier and happier, and eventually realized, well, this is my path. Like, now I know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm doing it. It's awesome. So I feel like the first step is to sort of do that inner healing, to kind of figure out what it is that does feed your soul, that does light you up. And that's Sylvia Boorstein is a great meditation teacher, and she's got a book called Happiness is an Inside Job. So it's an inside job, right? Everybody's got to figure out their own way. But I think that an essential part of kind of exploring your state of mind is quieting the mind. Because again, you have to go back to the culture, and we're bombarded constantly. So the attention span is like smaller and smaller and smaller, right? You can be online at the bank where maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago you would actually have a conversation with a stranger and connect and maybe laugh. Now everybody's on their phone, whatever, Facebook, tweeting. The connection there's less and less of it. So I think it takes more and more effort to quiet your mind. But for me, yoga, seated meditation, those were the tools that I used. And once I was able to do that, I could explore the kind of relationship I was having with myself, and I really, truly realized it's not loving. It's not loving. There's a really negative internal dialogue going on here all the time. And that internal dialogue, whatever it is for you, again, like our thoughts create our reality. So, and maybe that even sounds too new agey for you, but the chair that you're sitting on was a thought. Okay? It's not like the planet, whatever, there was an explosion and the planet arrived with chairs all over it. Somebody thought of that, right? So you're sitting on a thought, and any transformation, any invention, any movement at all started with an idea. That's it. So I feel like it's a hopeful situation because we can start to tell ourselves a new story. The personal story you're telling yourself is the first one. The relationship you're having with yourself is the first story. So if your internal dialogue is being fed by external information, basically you suck, right? Like you're just not right in any way. You gotta look at that first. Gotta look at that first and heal that. And then once that you have that love going on inside, then I just naturally want to spread it. It's not even an effort. It's natural to want to help people. It's natural to care about people. A lot of you I don't know, but I mean, I care. If you're okay, I do. You know, if you don't believe me, we can talk about it after, but I care. You know, it's completely natural to want to cooperate and take care of each other and not live in a box and not be so separate from nature. I think it's kind of bizarre that we don't get out there and hang out with trees. We just cut them down, you know. I mean, I bet a lot of you do, because again, we're in Southern California, you probably hike all the time. But I think if that were more the case, we'd be in a different situation. And I feel hopeful as I'm coming to the end of my time with you, because I feel like we do have the power to change the stories that we're telling ourselves and to start to take care of each other. I hope that we do. For sure, if we don't, we won't make it if we keep going like this. I'm going to end on a hopeful note, I promise. But you know, if you're not so sure about that, I know some people get sort of political about the whole idea of climate change, and you know, that's we don't have to go. We only have like a minute and a half. We can't even go there. But I think that, you know, there's no doubt if we continue using resources at the pace that we are, we're going to be in serious trouble. Every empire, if you look back in history, that's usually a good prediction of the future. Every empire that met its demise, going back to the Sumerians, to the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, they used up all the available resources. At the time, it was mostly wood. Today, it's oil, right? Our water source, it's the trees that we're cutting down. But if we keep going this way, for sure we won't make it. So I think it's definitely time to get together and wake up and start loving ourselves and loving each other and loving the planet, but I think it's totally doable. I am 45 seconds under. Thank you, Ren.